It's not politically correct. It's totally incorrect. You're listening to the Totally Incorrect podcast with David Holliday.
Hello there, and welcome to this latest edition of the Totally Incorrect podcast, the podcast that looks at history, politics, religion, and culture. This edition, since we've just had, in fact, we are still in the 4th of July weekend, America's birthday, is all about independence and the founding fathers, the people who signed the Declaration of Independence and started the train of events that has resulted in modern America. Yesterday, on July the 4th, the current president of these United States, Donald J. Trump, gave a nice testimonial to these heroes, the founding fathers. He says they made the world a better place, and they were wonderful people. What do you think of that? Well, let's look at who they were and some of the things they've done. And the preamble to the Declaration of Independence starts off with the famous line, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." And I believe that was written by Thomas Jefferson, and it sounds kind of cool. But these guys' interpretation of the word men was actually quite narrow. It didn't include women, who were certainly not considered equal, and in fact it took many, many years for them to be considered equal in these United States, if indeed they even are to this day. So women were excluded from being equal, and in addition, the population of the 13 colonies at the time of independence was around about 2.5 million people. This didn't include the 330,000 African slaves who'd been imported into the country, who were inventory. They were assets, they weren't people. And also the Native Americans, whose land it actually was, who also didn't count as men at that time. So it was a rather narrow interpretation of men being equal. It was basically men being like them that were equal. And you can kind of see a trend that continues to the present day here, I think. So who were these founding fathers and what did they do? If you visit Philadelphia, and you can also see it a million times online, there's a famous painting by an artist called John Trumbull that he actually called it Declaration of Independence. And in his picture in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, where it's on display to this day, I believe, there are 47 people. Of those 47 people, 42 of them were actually signers of the Declaration of Independence document, and the other 5 are described as other patriots. So just how great were these people? Well, to be honest, over the years, a lot of research has been done on this painting and the people who are actually depicted in it, and they've all been identified. And it's now known that 34 of those 47 people owned slaves. They were slave owners. So 34 of the 47 great patriots actually owned slaves. And of the signers of the Declaration itself, not everybody on the painting actually signed the Declaration of Independence. 56 delegates signed the Declaration of Independence, of whom 41 owned slaves. 41 out of 56 people, the wonderful founding fathers, were owners of slaves. And it's quite interesting looking at the lists of the people who owned slaves from the original 13 colonies. Obviously, everybody from the southern states, or the delegates from the southern states, yes, they certainly owned slaves, but there are some surprises on the list. John Hancock of Massachusetts owned slaves. I think he was the only one of the Massachusetts delegates who we could say that about. Benjamin Franklin was a slave owner, which I think certainly came as a surprise to me. What the heck? I always thought he was a good guy. Apparently, he owned just one slave. So you kind of have to wonder what that slave did. So to continue, all the delegates from the state of New York owned slaves, as did all 5 delegates from the state of New Jersey. Thomas Jefferson himself, who owned a lot of slaves. I've read 200 slaves, I've read 400 slaves, so I don't quite know what his actual number was, but it was a lot of slaves, and he's certainly well known for wanting to increase his inventory by actually breeding with his slaves himself. What a nice guy, and he was always considered one of the more civilized of the founding fathers. So I would say they're all in all a pretty nasty bunch of people. Should we really be calling them heroes and great examples to the world? Should we be trusting these people's views? Should we be trusting them on firearms, for example, and other things? I'm kind of thinking, no, we probably shouldn't. But the society that this group of people, these 56 delegates set up, had a population of nearly 4 million African slaves by 1860, around about the time the Civil War was ready to get started. And to me, it's absolutely no wonder that after the Civil War, with all of these African slaves being freed, white people were scared shitless at the thought of this large black population, 4 million people looking for vengeance. And that's why the apartheid system of Reconstruction and the Jim Crow laws came into being to keep this free black population under control and keep white privilege intact and to help white people feel safe. That continues to a very large extent today. There's still so much discrimination against black people. There are so many white people that, quite honestly, are afraid that their place of privilege is likely to come under attack. It is time for change. That white privilege, it probably is time to change it. So that's my thought. The Founding Fathers, yeah, they did some good things, but they also were basically bad people. Should we keep the monuments to those people? That's a whole nother story, and I'm sure that there'll be thoughts on that over the next few and more years in the future as to what we should do with those and how we should think of those people. So I think it's time for a change. I think that it's time for going back to the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, that the new declaration should be all people are equal, whether it's all people within the United States or whether it's all people within the world. All people need to be equal. And I think if we can change that and have that way of thinking, maybe there's hope for us of actually making it a good place. So thank you for listening. If you happen to come across this on one of the social media platforms, please make a comment and let me know what you think. I'm sure there are people who have different views to me. There's probably a few that have the same, but I'd love to know what you think and how we can make things better for everyone. So hope you had a good 4th of July, and thank you and take care.